Welcome to the Ex Terra Podcast. The Ex Terra mission is to explore and discuss the business of space and its effect on the national and global economy, as well as life on Earth. How does what happens in space affect your life every day? That's what we're exploring on the Ex Terra website, as well as on this podcast. My guest today is Guy de Carufel, founder and CTO of Cognitive Space. Guy, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
Let's talk a little bit, first of all, about some of the basics of cognitive space. You've said the company is, and I'll quote here, disrupting the space industry through intelligent infrastructure for satellite operators. So in layman's terms, what does that mean?
Yeah. So as you know, the space industry is going through very rapid growth right now and expected to grow 10, 20 folds over the next 10 years. And for that growth to actually be realized, you need to mature the infrastructure. And so that's where we come in. We're building the automation in infrastructure for the new space industry. The way operators are operating satellites today is improving, but it's still using a lot of old methods. And so just like telephone went through exponential growth after automation, the same will be true for the space industry, where automation will really enable the scaling of this industry.
Let's talk about your background just a little bit. How did you get started in this field?
Sure. Yeah. So my background is in aerospace engineering. I worked for many years at NASA as a contractor and a consultant. I did a lot of work in critical flight software systems for, say, the Orion spacecraft, and high fidelity simulation modeling for, say, the crew training facility and many other systems. Also did some command and control for spacecrafts, and a short stint at Firefly in Austin as a GNC engineer.
A serial entrepreneur?
I wouldn't say that. This is the first company that is operational and is successful. So before that, it was more of a playground for me to learn the ropes.
Now, a lot of folks like you would have had you had stable jobs in reputable companies with government agencies, and yet you came out and started your own company. What led you into the entrepreneurship angle of the new space economy?
Yeah, it's a bit masochist in a way, because, like you say, leaving a stable job was not necessarily easy. As same time as raising a newborn child with my wife, not the easiest path, but definitely rewarding. And I think I take it a lot from my father in terms of not accepting how things are, but seeing how things can be improved, and making a go at it and actually trying to make a difference. And so that's sort of where I got that from.
What was the thought process into leading you to start Cognitive Space, and how did you find that niche?
Yeah. So like I mentioned, I worked a lot at NASA, and NASA does incredible things, right? They build spacecraft for deep space, and they do what they do very well. But the way they do their systems, and from my experience there, is very exquisite systems, but it doesn't scale well, and it's not well suited for where the industry is going. And so I've always had an interest in AI and machine learning and cloud and technology and things like that. And so I saw bigger potential and better ways of doing things when it came to where the market's going and where the new space is going. And having a lot of friends in the industry, and from my background, I quickly realized that there's a lot of potential applications for automation and AI in the space industry to really scale this industry.
What kinds of applications are those? I mean, what can you do through AI that makes it all more efficient?
So, operating a satellite, 1, 2, 3 satellites is quite different than operating a fleet of satellites, say 12, 20, even 100 or even 1,000. Where it becomes an optimization problem for one, but also capacity management, and everything ties in then to business logic, et cetera. So it becomes a very different problem than your command and control, traditional operating of a single satellite. And so there's a lot of room there for automation, and frankly, you can't get around it. You need automation in order to do that at that scale.
Let's talk about your team a little bit. And I understand that you're currently hiring, and you have actually just added a new staff member.
We have, yeah, quite exciting. And I guess this is the first time we'll be sharing this news, but we'll be releasing a public press release pretty soon. But we have Scott Herman joining us as CEO, so he'll be taking over that role. And it's very exciting news. He comes with a very rich background in remote sensing, having previously been CTO at Black Sky and several other companies. So super exciting news.
Who else is on your team?
So we have a very senior staff of aerospace engineers, cloud and cybersecurity, data scientists, and full stack developers. What
led you to decide to kind of give up the reins as CEO? Because you had been listed as chief executive officer of the company. You founded the company. Yeah. What made you feel like you needed somebody different to take on that leadership role?
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously I started the company myself. I was wearing every hat, and I was looking, frankly, for, the right person to hand off the right hats. And I, met Scott through the Techstars program that we completed last summer. And I quickly realized that, he would wear it better than I could. And one of the values of the company is seek excellence. And so that was my engagement in terms of seeking excellence and finding someone that can really take that role better than I can, frankly. And I'm as CTO now, I can focus on moving the technology forward, and it's something that's very exciting.
So that's far more what your interest is in, is doing the technology piece as opposed to actually running the business.
I mean, not that I shy away from that. In fact, I'm still very heavily involved in engaging with companies and defense and so on. But there's just so many things one can do, and so bringing on someone like Scott at that caliber is really exciting, and really is going to move the company forward at an accelerated pace.
Let's talk a little bit more about the business in general, and specifically what kinds of problems does cognitive space solve for satellite operators? Yeah.
So the number one, it's improving the capacity of your satellites, and how streamlining the operations, and how you're making use of your systems. And it's enabling these satellite operators to help them be viable businesses, because one of the their key asset is their space assets, and so how do you maximize the use of those assets is key to their business, and so that's where we come in.
If you could be just maybe a little bit more specific, I know that the satellite constellations are growing both in numbers and complexity. And one of your products is called Sentient. And how does that product help in allowing companies to control these large constellations of satellites?
Yeah, so Sentient is is primarily, I'd say, a mission planning and optimization tool to really manage large-scale constellations of satellites in understanding how to fulfill their pipeline of missions while considering all the priorities and constraints that they have to fly under, both technical and business constraints, and then how does that translate to a practical and executable schedule that they can then gather their imagery or transfer their data.
Can you tell me a little bit about how it works?
Briefly, I mean, it's based
without
on
giving away anything proprietary.
Right. So we use machine learning technology. Specifically, it's called deep reinforcement learning, which is a technology that's been used in the academic world to train gaming engines to beat world champions. So we're using that same type of technology in our through our synthetic system in a cloud environment, and serving that through APIs and web interfaces as a you can call it a SaaS product.
Take me through maybe kind of a specific example, or a hypothetical example of what that might look like to the end user.
Yeah, sure. I mean, an end user might have one or multiple payloads on their satellite sensors, and they need to optimize against, say, cloud cover. How do they take imagery? Considering the different priorities that they have to account for from their customer, and then optimizing against, say, coverage for area coverage, or for latency, or what have you. You can optimize against many different metrics, but that's something we can tailor our system against, and so it's really a solution that satellite operator can bring in and really optimize their schedules.
Talk to me about your customer acquisition. How do companies find out about you, and how do you talk to them about the value that your company can provide them?
Sure. So right now, I mean, it's before the pandemic, there was a lot of meeting and greeting through conferences and such.
Mm-hmm.
But now it's more just through referrals and meeting, reaching out to the right people, and yeah, it's all about understanding where they are in their growth in terms of their operations, and how they're planning to scale their operations, and coming in and showcasing our product, and coming to an understanding of how can we help them maximize the use of their systems.
Now, you've got another product that I want to talk about briefly, just in light of the Colonial Pipeline hack. There's been a lot more awareness on computer and network security, and that can also be applied to space commerce. And your product is called FlowVault, which is a cybersecurity solution. Tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. Well, FlowVault is another product that we worked on for the UK government. And it's an effort to help on multi-level security management, data flow management. So that's one effort. But in terms of cybersecurity in general, because of by virtue of working with the Air Force, we have to adopt very stringent requirements when it comes to what they call DevSecOps. And so, that's things like, proper encryption, two-factor authentication, restrictions of access, and things like that. So we've had to adopt a lot of these best practices for the product itself. And our product, what we offer is scalability, resilience, reliability, and security. And so, cybersecurity is something we take very seriously. And frankly, our customers also take it seriously because a breach, like you saw, can be devastating.
How does that tie in with the Sentient product? Obviously, people are going to be very concerned about potential hacks on their satellites, on their data, and that could be devastating to a company or even to an economy. So, is there a connection between those two products? Is there something that you're offering that would help make satellites more secure?
Yeah, I mean, by virtue of being a secure SaaS solution that we, like I said, we adopt best practices, and we're hosted on AWS GovCloud, which has extra restrictions in terms of access. And the approach we take is to be to take the data security very seriously. Just like a company now would be ill-suited to build out their own cloud systems in-house because of issues like cybersecurity and proper, you need the expertise in-house to doing that. Now there's a push, most companies now will work with AWS or with Azure or what have you. And for the same reasons, it makes a lot of sense to work with a company like Cognitive Space to take care of your satellite operations because we have in-house expertise not only in the operations side but also in cybersecurity. So you can be rest assured that that part is secure.
You're listening to the Ex Terra Podcast. I'm Tom Patton, and I'm chatting with Guy de Carufel, founder and CTO of Cognitive Space. Guy, you're one of the portfolio companies of the Space Fund, which just announced the completion of their first VC fund. How was that experience? How were they to work with?
Yeah, Space Fund's been great. They've been a great partner for us. Really exciting to have them as an investor. Their premise is all about modernizing the infrastructure, what they call the investing in pickaxes of the new space domain. So we fit pretty well in that premise, they know the industry inside out, and so they're a great partner to work with.
How important is that kind of help when you're establishing a business?
I mean, it's very important to have a company like that has the deep expertise, back you and put in real money into the company is a true validation point, and really helped us go on and raise even more with other investors that didn't necessarily have that space expertise, and so truly important.
Where do you see Cognitive Space right now as far as the maturity of the company? Where do you put yourself on the spectrum of between startup and fully mature operational company?
Well, it depends what your definition of a startup is, because some people would call, say, even Uber a startup in some circles. But so I mean, we're definitely a startup still. We've been operating for company is about 3 years old now. We have been operating in active setting for the Air Force, and now working on more a new focus on the commercial space. So definitely on the early side of things, but you'll be hearing from us much more in the coming years.
Where do you see Cognitive Space in the next few years?
Yeah, so we'll be engaged with several satellite operators. We'll be working with several partners as adjacent services, and we'll be an important component to the infrastructure and the new space industry.
When you talk about artificial intelligence as it relates to operating satellites, is there a point where perhaps the human factor is largely out of satellite operations? Do you see that these large constellations of satellites will become somewhat autonomous, other than when people go up and grab data out of them?
Yeah, I mean, satellites will become IoT devices in a way. There'll be devices that just happen to be in space, and there'll be remote devices that you'll be talking to, and they'll be integrated within an overall system. Now, you'll always need to have human supervision, at least for the foreseeable future, to make sure that they're doing the right thing, they have the right priorities, and so on. But as far as day-to-day operations, all of that will be eventually all automated. So yeah.
Go ahead. I didn't want to cut off your thought there.
Yeah, that's yeah.
And I guess the follow-on question to that comes to mind is, does it eventually become a common carrier kind of situation? Does satellite data eventually get to the point where it's like the telephone company, or natural gas, or the internet, which is essentially a common carrier that's available to everyone?
Yes and no. I mean, each satellite operator offers different value to their customer. They have different payloads. They have different models in terms of how they serve their customer. And so, there's still, it's not necessarily a common service that, if you need imagery, you just ask whoever and you'll get that imagery. There's still particularities from providers. So yeah, I guess you'll get different flavors of that, but it will become more of an integrated system eventually, where it'll be a much more commonplace in every other industry to have access to satellite systems.
And let's look out over the next 10 to 15 years at space commerce in general, because we're all kind of on the cusp of a very nascent industry right now. What do you think space commerce is going to look like over the next decade or so?
Yeah. I mean, I don't have a crystal ball, but my prediction is that, space will become, we say new space, but, space itself in orbit will be an important market on its own, where you're going to have space tourists and in space servicing, and you'll have to, keep track of active traffic management, and you'll have installations on the moon and eventually Mars. All that will happen in the next 15 years. And so for that infrastructure to actually, develop and take hold, you're going to need a lot of different services and a lot of different aspects of that industry. And we hope to be an important part of that.
So does then the satellite industry become infrastructure, or is it now? Is it something that will be a building block for whatever comes next?
Yeah, I believe so. It's an exciting time to be here. The prospect of being able to do a vacation on the moon, or have movies filmed on the moon, or things like that, and all the benefits that space brings to the Earth directly in terms of climate change monitoring and economic and national security. The space will become more and more prevalent in our everyday life, and that's quite exciting.
So, is that infrastructure changing or maturing in any way? What's happening in that field that might bring about some interesting changes in the future?
Yeah, so the way we operate satellites is changing, very rapidly, and just as you used to be, when you wanted to send up satellites, you had to basically build the whole thing yourself. You had to build the hardware, even the payload, and that changed. That changed over the last 15 years or so, where a lot of companies now offered hardware that you could buy and assemble your satellites for you. And so the commoditization of the satellite allowed for that. And then in the same vein, ground systems, you used to have to build your systems yourself. And now you have services like AWS and KSAT and many others that you can then outsource your ground systems. And so in the same idea, we're offering a way to outsource your mission planning and your satellite operations that traditionally you have to build in-house. And so it's a way to streamline that process and standardize it, and really mature the infrastructure in that next step.
Is commercial off-the-shelf hardware playing a role in that as well?
Yeah, you have to be compatible with that, and in terms of communication protocols and things like that. There's some efforts there to in the industry in general to standardize those, and so all of these efforts in standardizing and helps the industry in being more streamlined, more efficient, and frankly be more viable as a business case.
Well, Guy, thank you very much. I really appreciate your time. It's been an interesting conversation. And is there anything else that you need people to know about cognitive space before I let you go?
No, it's been great. Thanks very much, Tom. Appreciate it.
And that's going to do it for this edition of the Ex Terra Podcast. Find us on the web at xterrajsc.com. And be sure to connect with us on LinkedIn and follow us on Twitter at XTerraJSC. Until next time, I'm Tom Patton. Thanks for listening.